Marhaba, my name is Nadine Makarim. I currently manage a global education program that supports Palestinian students pursuing medical school in different countries. I am also the co-founder of Shutter Collective and a writer. This is my poem for the global reading in solidarity with Palestine. Shukran. More than 200 years ago came a year without the summer. A mountain on stolen land sent pumes of ash and sharp dust floating across the horizons, a rampage of tiny renegades transgressing fictional borders to suffocate the tyrants in their chairs. A rampage of debris sent ice-cold winds across the borders of empire. They called it a global climate anomaly and mourned the losses that inflicted their pockets. Today, the olives grow too large, and the wind carries a scent of stale salt. The white butterflies roam about too freely, without notion that the wide gray ether is not in their favor. The fruit trees shiver under the residual whine of a sonic boom. Their fruits latch onto the branches to save themselves from the deformity of a premature birth. Can they actually poison the air? A light pink hue and orange gradients in the afternoon that feigns God and deems us dreamers in the soft light of a miraculous sun. But there are no dreams where the windows are destitute, where scenery and scaffolding succumb to the whim of the enemy, where thunder, bringer of rain, grows fangs and is mistaken for a monster in the sky. More than 200 years ago, the kingdom of Tambora, still sovereign under the sulking spread of the occupiers, disintegrated completely, leaving a trail of charred rice fields and black water. Today, bodies covered in bejeweled beachwear sit sprawled along the coastline, escaping the cool, cold, barren winter of their own homes. Today, families peel winter's clementines in a cloud of scorching heat, the strong scent lingering on their fingers, reminiscent of a fireplace in the safe comfort of home, in the safe comfort of land and garden and cluttered, colorful roofs. Maybe another volcano will chase away the planes in the sky that capture the rain before it falls. An eruption of fervor, of a love more viscous and strong than any reservoir of burning molten rock. The indigenous earth, the homebound winds, the trepidations in the soil are allowed to deprive us of summer, of winter, of generous spring and regenerating fall. But the monsters in the sky will not.
This is Rayyan Abdel Khaliq, a translator, a writer, and a DJ from Mount Lebanon. Samah Idris insinuated on December 4, 2013 the following: "Our issue with the Arab regime is an issue with oppression, criminality, corruption, and clientelism. Our problem with Israel is a problem with the entity itself, its regime, its state, its army, its institutions, its economy, its culture, its tourism, its industry, its agriculture, its right, its left, and its center. Idris is right to state that the issue with Israel is one with the entity itself. However, he does not address the following problematic. Can the struggle against the Zionist entity be resolved and won within the context of the current entities of the Arab regimes? or even through the very notion of national identities? Or is it actually only solvable through a drastic reconfiguration of these entities? That is what history has shown before, with the path of the Palestinian revolution that has imposed transformations and contradictions on the reality of the established Arab entities from Syria to Lebanon to Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and others. In its rise, the Palestinian revolution clashed objectively not only with the Zionist entity, but also with the national structure of the whole of the Arab regimes. It would be illusory to consider nationalist thought as being in contradiction with capitalism. The emergence of the state is conditional to the development of capitalist economic and social structures, and the divergence from and ultimately destruction of pre-capitalist structures. From there on in, the notion of entity and national identity, the finality of a certain entity and its relation to other entities, are concepts that cannot come into being without the centralized establishment of a bourgeois state apparatus that governs society under the cover of a national identity, be it Arab, Levantine, Lebanese, Syrian, Islamic, Christian, or other. All constitute an ideological cover for the dominating bourgeois regime itself. The ideological premises from which nationalist thought stems to confront the dependency on imperialism are in no fundamental contradiction with imperialism itself. They share the same thought structure, that is, the bourgeois governance system with which they identify. For this reason, we see that the Arab nationalist regimes that emerged in the last decades of the 20th century have proven over time that they were no different from the bourgeois client regimes. Indeed, the Arab nationalist regimes have renewed their relation to and identification with the interests of imperialism, even if the degree to which they identify with those interests may differ. The structural crisis of nationalist thought, from its left to its center to its right, lies in the fact that it lives on those contradictions that characterize the capitalist system and cannot part with them. It is itself an articulation of the attempt by that bourgeois ideological structure to conceive new identities in order to maintain its ideological dominance in renewed ideological clothing. Going back to Idris's depiction of the struggle against Israel as an existential one, in contrast to the struggles with the Arab regimes, with the latter reduced to a mere struggle against tyranny and other internal affairs, we ask, how can Palestine be liberated? How can a project of resistance be sustained through the existing structures of the Arab regimes, or through the national bourgeois apparatus in the context of the shifts and alliances that are sprouting on the regional and international political theaters? The answer to this question can come not as an entity's revolution or a national revolution, but a permanent revolution that arises from the structural contradictions in Arab societies. The social, economic, and political problems that arise on the political level cannot be solved by any bourgeois refurbishment of the established regimes in their own national space. They can only be solved by the overthrow of the system of bourgeois rule and by defying the system of class dominance in general. The issue of the revolution gives the resistance another dimension and poses an essential problematic on the current resistance cases. Can the Zionist entity collapse? Can the US and EU be stopped without a radical break with the bourgeois structure that legitimizes foreign interference and dominance? Will the Arab bourgeoisie relinquish their common interests with the American or Israeli bourgeoisie in order to liberate Palestine? Will the Iranian regime, for instance, give up the necessity to integrate into the world oil market? Will the Syrian regime give up its economic relations with Western regimes? Naturally, the answer is no, because we live in a highly interlaced world economy. The myth of self-sufficiency is nothing but a myth. All the attempts at self-sufficiency have shown that its proponents will align themselves sooner or later with one of the great capitalist poles. This is not caused by a degeneration of values among the bourgeoisie, It is a natural consequence of the interlacements of interests between the regional and the foreign bourgeoisies, particularly when the former is placed in the position of defending its hegemony against the rise of class struggle. That interlacement is part of the global capitalist fabric in which we live and which is still in a position of dominance, even if it is faltering. Therefore, we cannot but see liberation from imperialism and occupation as part of the process of social liberation. It enters the process of class struggle, not from the realm of economics, but also from its social, ideological, and cultural perspective. Liberation and emancipation are not two distinct phases in a successive program, but two sides of the same struggle. The struggle for the organization of the working class in the region on an independent struggle, but also as a step towards on an independent revolutionary basis. This is not only needed to develop the purely economic trade unionist struggle, but also as a step towards the achievement of real liberation and the fracture of the system on which imperialism subsists and through which it controls the region, that is, the capitalist system that governs all of our lives. Mass resistance is no longer the hypothetical issue it used to be, one that was rebuffed by many for its irrelevance. It has become a historical necessity for the emancipation of the people of the Middle East, not only from occupation and imperialism, but also from dictatorship, tyranny, oppression, and exploitation. Without mass resistance, a human salvation will remain a mere dream, not an actual serious project waiting for the conditions of its fulfillment. Being a realist today does not mean depending on a structure that emerged not so long ago out of the destruction of existing resistance organizations, but it is by building structures of radically different class nature from the ones that were built for past defeats. Hezbollah has ended the Israeli occupation of South Lebanon, but may not be capable of putting an end to Israeli threat or imperialist hegemony. Therefore, all those who consider themselves revolutionaries must answer these essential questions. How do we really emancipate ourselves from imperialism? And how can Palestine really be free? Not only through delusional hopes resting on regimes that will abandon any project that clashes with their bourgeois hegemonic interests, as they have done in the past. It is only through revolution that it is possible to break dependency, clientelism, occupation, oppression, tyranny, and exploitation, and their resulting culture. It cannot be done through delusions based on the hope that some bourgeois apparatus, Arab or otherwise, might carry us to a better tomorrow. We know in advance that this will never happen, as any improved social situation will clash with bourgeois dominance and bourgeois interests. Change will only be made by the revolutionary masses, for it is in their core interests. This was Bassem Sheet from his article Nationalism, Resistance and Revolution, published in January 2014, just 8 months before he died at the age of 35 due to a heart attack. Bassem was a revolutionary thinker and a writer who founded the Marxist journal Al-Thawra Al-Da'ima, Permanent Revolution, which this reading is from. Thank you. And down with imperialism, the nation state, and free Palestine.
Hi everyone, my name is Noor Turkmani and I'm reading 4 shortish poems from Lisbon. The first poem is Garden. I love your elbows, that dark region where your lungs open beneath my fingers, touching me like a gash. In the crowd, it is your eyes I find, singing me the oldest song once we reach the garden. The cactus and bony branches, damp grass under a moon, so many fruits. With you, I am never hungry, only hungering. I mean, in the room of your arm, this nest, I am two birds, and it is night again. No, this song cannot die. I mean, here's a mountain, then an earthquake. Hold me still until. The second poem is Epilogue as Preface, which is actually, which I wrote exactly this time last year. I started to write in my head exactly this time last year. It was when the ceasefire between Lebanon and Israel was being negotiated, and there was a red dot over my neighborhood in Hamra. And I was not in Hamra. I was very lucky to be outside of Lebanon when the war escalated, when Israel's war in Lebanon escalated. And I remember in the haze of my fear and anguish, I was thinking a lot of, my library, which I always say I was, I'm kind of ashamed to have been thinking of, but I was thinking of my books. So this poem is called Epilogue as Preface. Suppose the nightmare happens. Your library on fire, pages burning, commas ashed. Suppose the shrapnel, the haze. Suppose it is the last day and there isn't a shelf to lean on. What remains? Not the buildings and billboards, the spice jars, the whiskey that never spoils. Not an olive or an orange, not our mouths and names, not doom or this moment, only memory. Barely an image, color of the sea, a deepest blue. Your voice, which is mine and smiling. I almost hear it. It is telling me to cross. My third poem is Animal Grief. I also wrote this when the Green Southerners, an incredible environmental grassroots group in Lebanon, released a photo of a jackal. And a lot of wild animals had sort of gone into hiding or migrated or moved away because of how horrible, the white phosphorus bombs and the explosions by Israel in the south of Lebanon were. And so, the Green Southerners spotted a jackal and took a photo of it, and I saw it being circulated on social media. And that kind of pushed me to write this poem. Animal Grief. A jackal returns to the border town of Aitagun after a year of phosphorus bombs. June, wasn't it? Years ago when we swam in the opal sea of Naura, also a border town. How strange to be 30 and for those words, years and ago, to bear such weight. Do you remember? We had fish, split open pomegranates and lazed into the afternoon. On our way home to Beirut, the sky curious like a face, you said border towns are the most beautiful, their existence depending on make-believe. Like us, they inherit illusion, then displacement. The jackal's ancestor was the 2-million-year-old river dog, roaming what is now southern Europe. A fossil found near Beirut tells us this. Now, its descendant stands in a field after a war that is over, but not yet. Jackal, from the Turkish çakal, from the Persian shagal. This legacy of naming, or theft. The disappointment of the jackal's gaze. What does it see that we don't? All day I've wondered about you, your orchards, the orange and lemon trees and the heat, your ache trapped like a root. Of all the things I can envy a jackal for, its instinct to mate for life, the shed of its coat from red to tawny dark, the trot of its feet slipping into valleys and forests to feign a perfect death. It is the howl that haunts me. The rise and fall of sound as midday descends to night and night becomes chorus. I imagine us on the Naura cliff, the jackal above, a whale thin as wind we imitated, hesitant as we've been taught to be until, without warning, our lungs yield. A cry, wild and guttural, rips through towns and settlements, hurling the language off our chest, this room We've tucked terror in, this terror that knows no borders, every stone and trunk hurtling down river valleys, over gorges, past the falls. We howl and howl and howl into the livid mouth of the year. I'll end on a very short poem that's still unnamed, but for now let's call it October 7, 2024. We are one swollen throat. We live inside a pain we cannot swallow. Our thoughts convulse like a tablet in water. There's something catastrophic about language, how suddenly it dissolves. Now, this new drink, this old dictionary, who will teach us to read it? Thank you.
مرحبا، أنا اسمي ربا، بشتغل بمجال العمل الاجتماعي. بالغلط جيت على الشعر وبكتير صح صار الشعر جزء كتير كبير من حياتي ومن علاقتي بالعالم، خاصة اللي بطلوا بجسدهم معنا. رح كون عم بقرا شي كتبته من بعد ما مفروض كانت تخلص الحرب بلبنان، لأن مين قدر يكتب خلالها. أنت مثلي وهي مثلي وهم مثلنا، وبهذا المعنى كلنا مقاوم، كلنا على جبهة نحارب، ببنادق وجع نرشق الخوف، نراقب ونحارب. نحارب لوجودنا، لانتمائنا، نحارب لشجرة الزيتون، نحارب لتل الزعتر ورائحة الزعتر، للعنزة رنجس، لكل قطرة قدست أرضها، نحارب لكل دمعة ذرفت لقضية، نحارب لمجرد أننا ولدنا بهوية نحبها حتى لو لم نخترها، نحارب لهوية اختارتنا، لثقة عمياء كانت أم مبصرة، نحارب. فاحمل قلبك بيدك وحارب، واحملني لو أصابوا قلبك وأنا أحارب. فالبيت لنا والحب لنا وقصائد الدرويش لنا، وأبو المقاومة القاسي شأن أم أبينا لنا. لحياة، لوجود، لوجه صارخ، أنا مثلهم وأنت مثلي، حارب على سطوح الجنوب أو في أزقة بيروت المزدحمة بالرهاب. هل ولد الجنوب مثلي ومثلك؟ أم هل ولد الرهاب مقاوما؟ أم هل تعددت الجبهات وحكم علينا إلى أبد الآبدين وفي كل الميادين أن نحارب؟ انتهت الحرب، انتهت الحرب وعاد كل إلى مسقط رأسه، وسقطت أنا فوق قبرك غصنا يبحث عن هواء، ثمرة لم تنضج تبحث عن جذور اقتلعت قسرا وجبرت على الحياة بينهم. لم أثمر، لم أزهر، ولست أقف شامخة، سرت الكثير من الكيلومترات وهو أمر ليس من شيم الشجر. سرت الكثير من الكيلومترات وسقطت فوق قبرك، توقفت عن البحث، فما الفائدة؟ فالحقيقة واحدة، أنت تحت التراب وأنا فوقه. قلب لا ينبض رغم تسارع دقاته، عقل لا يعمل رغم تهافت أفكاره. سقطت فوق قبرك وسقط آلاف الشهداء، سقطت أوراق كثيرة، سقط المطر، سقط النظام، سقط شعري، سقط قلمي وسقط شعري، وسقطت أنا هنا مسقط رأسي.